Speaking Human.
This week on Speaking Human, we tune you into the increasing static at Dish Network, fill you in on how Facebook will help fulfill your future wants, and discreetly delve into the mother of all scandalous smartphone map controversies, Mapplegate.
Speaking Human.
Welcome to Speaking Human, the official podcast of Monsters Unlimited. I'm Shad Conley, the 560 billionth most valuable brand in the world.
And I'm Patrick Jebber, and you can want me on Facebook.
So for those of you who haven't listened to the podcast before, we kick off each week by taking on the latest mortal marketing news, then unleash the fury of our superhuman review. In this week's review, we gaze into the sweet and shiny eyes of Apple and get lost because of that damn map app. So let's get into it. Mortal marketing news! So for our first story of the day is actually a follow-up to something we previously discussed on the podcast. Our featured review, episode 2, was about Dish Network and their war with AMC. The story coming out today is Dish Network still has a problem. And the latest news is, recently, because it dodged another bullet, this time it almost lost CBS, ABC, and NBC affiliates in 19 different cities. Now, they didn't lose them. At the last minute, the crisis was sort of averted, compromise was made, and what sort of effect do you think this is going to have on customers, Patrick?
From what I've read, I really think that this is going to hurt Dish Network greatly in terms of subscribers, because people aren't really happy with them. Dish Network has basically dropped 14 million subscribers. That's big.
It is, and you think about how many choices do you really have when it comes to your cable. You know, maybe in each area you've got like 3 choices, and you know one of them doesn't have AMC, one of them is fighting to keep its NBC, ABC, and CBS affiliates. Not exactly something that makes you confident in having the dish.
You know, one of the reasons why these networks, they wanted more money is because they have that new DVR box.
The Hopper.
Yeah, the Hopper, right. Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons why they want more money, because I thought to myself, why are these networks asking for 300% more, in a lot of cases? And it all comes back to they're going to be losing advertising revenue. So they're trying to make up for that, at least guarantee themselves that additional revenue through the cable provider.
Which is something interesting I never really thought about. Now, most, cable companies, satellite companies, they all offer some form of DVR, but you're not skipping through the commercials altogether. You're fast forwarding through them, so technically you're still seeing the brand in the commercials. Even if it's on fast forward, you're still taking that in.
Right. And that's the thing that I think differentiates this new Hopper DVR platform that they're pushing, that advertisers are going to start moving away from television. That's why they go to the online platforms, because, people aren't watching commercials on TV.
Sounds kind of amazing, though. Skip right through the commercials, record 6 things at once.
To be honest with you, that's what I would love about a DVR box. If I could just get rid of the commercials altogether, you could get pretty spoiled on that fast.
Yeah, and I think people are. Anyway, the dark days for the dish. Not looking great there. So anyway, going from one struggling company to another company still looking to find its path into the future, we have the latest news story that Facebook starts testing the want button. You want to give us a little background on this story, Patrick?
Absolutely. So right now, Facebook is really trying to, find, like you said, to find their path in terms of advertising revenue. And now they're adding a want button on branded websites, right? So Target, Walmart, whatever the brand is, they'll actually have a want button on their site. And for whatever a product is, a person can click the want button and it'll add it to their Facebook timeline. And my friends will then buy that for me because it's sort of on my wish list, right? My want in Facebook. I think it's a great idea, as a matter of fact. I've not been totally sold on all of Facebook's marketing initiatives and the way that they've been trying to push advertising. I feel like they sort of struggle in a lot of areas and put things out there that aren't really thought through all the way. I feel like this is a more solid concept for me.
I agree. And, I think there is some value to that. I think this is a better way to integrate sort of selling stuff into the Facebook experience in a way that makes sense. Because even for people using it, you're showing people what you want, potentially creating your own wish list. people are showing this to their friends, which I think in a way influences, if you know somebody else wants something, doesn't it make you want something? There's kind of that social selling aspect to it. Right now, it's just being tested by a handful of brands, Pottery Barn, Victoria's Secret, a few others. And I don't know what they're testing for, just to see how it works. But I don't really understand, I guess, Facebook's plan for the future of it. Like, is there a way they'll get revenue out of it? Do you know the answer to this?
Yeah, I believe they'll actually start getting revenue just like the advertising model they have now, where you can launch Facebook ads. They'll probably get advertising dollars for every click-through or for every purchase. I'm not sure how they'll tie it into the e-commerce page, but I think that's what I was reading, is that they'll have different models for different businesses, because some businesses can just do it by the traffic they send their way. Others are going to probably want to do it by how much they sell. They'll get revenue from that.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Like I said, if they can make it a more integrated experience where you're advertising to people and they're, or they're more involved in it, I guess, all the better. It's one of the better ideas Facebook has rolled out.
I think so. Yeah, I think we should up the stakes and create a need button. I need this. I definitely need this. Want is so, whatever.
Do you think this new button, do you think this is Pinterest influenced?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know.
It's all based on the idea of visuals and, sharing products, pinning things you like or want too.
Depending on the type of person using it and what they're using Pinterest for, yeah, there are some similarities there, and it could be inspired by that. It'd be interesting to see if they take it more visual like Pinterest is. That's what's been so successful with Pinterest.
Yeah, and they've been pushing in that direction, But I like the idea of using social media to not get a bunch of crap for Christmas.
That's right. Give me stuff that I actually want. If you go on my Facebook page, you'll see everything that I want.
The other news about Facebook, actually, that just came along about a week ago was 1 billion active users. 1 billion. Now, it's funny that it gets to the point, it was like a news story, but it kind of wasn't. You know what I mean? It hit like 500 million, and that was a huge thing, and now they hit 1 billion, and everybody's kind of like shrugging.
Yeah. I have 1 billion emails sitting in my inbox right now, so, 1 billion doesn't mean anything. It's one of those things where now, like you said, people are sort of desensitized by those numbers, especially, I think, because of you and I deal with this a lot, and it's the statistics that come out, 56%, 200 million.
Everything has a statistic attached to it.
Yeah, and quite frankly, 1 billion active users, I sort of don't even care.
Yeah, I think there's been this sort of shift where for a while it was like Facebook was the hot thing. Facebook was interesting. Everybody was talking about Facebook. Now it's just so ingrained in culture, and it's kind of beating everybody over the head, and everybody's like, Facebook. It's part of life. It's there. I go to it every day. Nobody's really excited about it. Nobody's interested in talking about it anymore. It's like TV. It's just part of life.
You could send me a headline like that every day, and I wouldn't care. I'd be like, Facebook hits 1 billion active users, yippity-doo-dah.
Well, here's the final question before we wrap this story up. Do you think Facebook will ever reach 2 billion users?
I'm going to go on the record and say no.
Yeah, I don't either.
That people are, like you said, over it. It's a part of life, and there will always probably be active users, but will they ever eclipse 1 billion? It took them a long time to get to 1 billion. And when I say a long time in, technology terms, been a blink of an eye. But I don't know. I would go on the record and say no, because by the time it takes them to hit 2 billion, I think that they might not even be around anymore. Did I just say that? Facebook.
I think they'll be around, and I still don't think they'll hit 2 billion. I think they'll hit about 1.5 billion, and then they'll start to backslide because something else will come along and, take a bite out of them or something like that. But I don't know, 2 billion? I just don't see it.
I'm there with you, man.
Well, anyway, Facebook flows into our next story because they actually, for the first time, cracked the list of most valuable global brands. This past week, Interbrand released their 2012 list of most valuable global brands. Some of the names at the top of the list, as to be expected: number 1, Coca-Cola; number 2, Apple, surprise; number 3, IBM, Google, Microsoft, GE, McDonald's, Samsung, and you get the idea. Disney, stuff like that. There's a lot of the huge, you look at the list, it's basically a who's who of recognizable brands.
I don't know who eBay is. Who's eBay?
I've never heard of eBay.
Yeah, there's a lot of big ones on there.
Was there anything that stuck out to you in particular on this list? Any names you saw in here, or any things you thought were higher than you'd expect them to be?
Not really. I guess I was a little surprised that Gillette is number 16 on that list. Gillette? Really?
Yeah.
I feel like, it's a great brand, don't get me wrong. I use Gillette products, but I can't believe they're that high. Like, I would think other ones would be above that. Like, I would think Nike would be above Gillette, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Nike's number 26.
Yeah, there's quite a few of them. I guess I'm surprised at the order. Even GE I thought was higher than I thought it'd be. I know they own like a lot of other stuff, or something like Nokia.
Yeah, I guess it's market saturation too. You know, like they might only be up 2%, but that 2%, because of their market share, it is interesting the way the brands lay themselves out in this list. I'm a little surprised IKEA is actually in the top 50. I mean, I know IKEA is big, but I didn't realize they were that big. You know, they're in 28 on the list. Right under UPS.
I mean, it's basically what a brand is. You can see why they're so valuable, because they have such weight and you know these things, and most of them have been just ingrained in your head. You know, McDonald's and Nintendo, unavoidable almost in our world. You know what I mean? I thought, another interesting thing on the list was new entrants on the list. Ended number 34 was Pampers, and the person on our Facebook page, commented, they're like, Pampers? Haven't they been around forever? How did they all of a sudden jump to number 34 on the list? It's one of the reasons is their use of social media connected and expanded their customer base, created more customer loyalty. So social media playing a big part. A couple of these brands getting in here, I think.
You mean there's not more babies in the world? That's not the reason?
I don't know. There seems like a lot of babies. Babies are hot right now.
Babies, it's a hot topic.
Yeah, babies were actually the number 56 brand on this list.
You have a baby. That's a good brand.
So anyway, all in all, it's an interesting list to take a look at, see what these brands that are of great global value.
Absolutely. To see brands rise and fall, just like Pampers, it's a interesting observation.
It is, and especially to see, always interesting to me is the ones that stick around, brand names and logos that have just become so strong that you can't imagine the world without them.
Could you imagine the world without number 64, Kentucky Fried Chicken?
Yeah, the Colonel. Who doesn't know the Colonel?
It's a good side note. When I was on my honeymoon, this was, almost 10 years ago now, we were in St. Lucia. Did I ever tell you this story? That on one of the buildings, there was a mural painted. It had the Colonel, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and said, "The Colonel says stay in school." I swear to God. It was the craziest thing, because we're like, the Colonel?
He's a big proponent of education. He was the teacher in The Waterboy.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
He guts and fries chicken. The guy knows books.
He's used that to make some good chicken.
And on that note...
And now it's time for our featured
review.
So for this week's Superhuman Review, we're talking about iPhone 5 and the scandal known as Mapplegate.
Oh, yes.
I like to be real dramatic about this because this has become such a big, inflated story. I want to give it the weight and drama it deserves.
People are going to think we're Apple lovers because we talk about them so often, but it's just because they're in the news so often.
It's hard to avoid, but I was thinking at this when we were putting the show together. I was like, God, can we talk about Apple again? And I'm like, can't avoid it. But we guarantee this is the last time until the next podcast we'll talk about it.
Yes. Until next time.
So why don't you give the folks out there a little background on Mapplegate?
I didn't even know that term was being used for it. The reason why they used that was because of the antenna gate issue that they had, a year or two ago when they did the 4, where people were holding it on both sides and it was dropping the signal.
Well, it's funny because the whole, ever since Watergate, now everything gets gate, even though it doesn't make any sense. That just means scandal.
Yeah, they replaced the Google Maps app when they changed over to iOS 6. Apple has been doing a lot of work over the last year and a half. They hired a bunch of map specialists and experts to pump up their app because they were in negotiations to get the turn-by-turn navigation. Google just wouldn't give it up. They wouldn't allow Apple to use it, and they've been using it on the Android phones for a while now. That's when Apple knew they had to really make some changes. That's the backstory. The app itself and the problems that people have experienced just been overinflated to the point where I think the media just took it and blew it way out, just like they do everything else, But
it really turned into a firestorm. I mean, just left and right. Everywhere just blew up how terrible the maps are. Stories, I couldn't even find this place. This took me to something in a different state.
Yeah, but in Apple's defense, and this is honestly an unbiased look at it, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that MapQuest and Google Maps And if you remember back, I can't tell you how many times people couldn't find things and they would take them to the wrong place. People would complain and complain that the maps were bad.
Which back then, if you remember, you have a printed list of directions.
Yeah, you're screwed.
Don't take you where you need to go.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you don't, now, if you make a wrong turn, it just redirects you. And the same thing with, the map apps. They should do that. Well, here's the thing. Even when the Google Maps app came out, it wasn't perfect. None of those apps have been perfect the very first time out. There have been people complaining about the wrong directions for a long time.
Years. It took Google years to get there.
Yeah, exactly. We're all so spoiled in the way that we get information now that if it doesn't hold up to something you already have, you're going to completely diss it. Because I got to tell you, man, I never used Google Maps app on my iPhone because I'd have to press the next button every time I got to a certain point on the map. And I'll tell you, you could get into an accident doing that pretty quickly. And so the voice navigation is awesome. I know there are places that are going to have problems because there's all kinds of little nooks and crannies in this world that aren't going to be on the map. But I would never replace my GPS for my phone's map app. I just wouldn't. I went to GPS a couple years ago, and I'll never go back. I would use the map app on the phone. Like I'm in a pinch. My GPS got stolen. I don't have any other choice. So people who are like freaking out because it took them, man, get a GPS. They're $89. It's so much cheaper than buying.
And probably soon to be like $10 now that this kind of software has made them pretty much obsolete.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. I mean, I agree with you on a lot of points. Personally, I'm completely directionally impaired. So to me, GPS in general was one of the greatest inventions of our time. I love the Apple Maps. I've used it probably half a dozen times. I've never had a problem with it. I think it's so easy. I love the fact that I have spoken directions to anywhere in my pocket. I think it's fantastic. Maybe if it took me to the wrong state, I wouldn't think that, but it hasn't done that yet.
I know people said, well, it's missing walking directions, all kinds of... Yeah, that was actually pretty helpful, but that was about the only time I ever used Google Map app.
The Google Map app in the car for the iPhone, I mean, unless you have someone else in there, it's basically worthless.
Yeah.
It's like a recipe for a crash.
Yeah, exactly.
Some people have had problems with it, whether that's blown out of proportion, which I think if this wasn't Apple, if this was some other phone, nobody'd even be talking about it, but you got to have something bad to say about Apple, Do you think they went ahead with it too early? Do you think they should have worked on it a little more, built it up a little more?
In the articles that I've read, people have said that they released it too early. And for me, I think that you could take forever perfecting something, but sometimes you need that feedback. You need people going in and telling you what's missing. And I think that helps them better the app. You need human interaction, and you need it on a large scale for it to improve. Google didn't perfect their map apps by keeping it internal for 5 years. They perfected it by people giving criticisms and feedback.
Yeah, and I think isn't that the case with all apps? They're all constantly being improved and updated, and you're making them better. I mean, obviously this is a different case because it's maps, and people are relying on them to get from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, Apple has a pretty strong history of taking things and continually improving them and tweaking them to get them where they want to. On the other side of that, I guess Apple also has a history of releasing things that are usually in pretty good shape. They're more usually blowing people away.
I've seen a lot of people saying things like it's because of people's expectations of Apple that they really got beat down on this. It is what it is, at least they owned up to it. Tim Cook, the CEO, came out and said he apologized for people having a less than awesome experience with their product.
Like you said, the expectations just so high. People expect sort of the perfect product from Apple. So coming out with something that has so many problems and bugs in it already is kind of un-Apple. And I think the same thing did kind of happen with AntennaGate. It's a flaw, a crack in the perfect facade of Apple.
Yeah, right.
CNET reported this week that several developers now are saying they warned Apple against including the Maps application in the new iOS 6.
Blah, blah, blah,
yeah.
Whatever.
Well, this is a quote from one unnamed developer that I thought I'd read because it's pretty funny. I'll read it in the way I picture his voice. I posted at least one doomsday rant after each developer beta, and I wasn't alone. The mood amongst the developers seemed to be that the maps were so shockingly bad, the reporting individual problems was futile. what they needed wasn't so much an interface for reporting a single point as incorrect, but for selecting an entire region and saying all of this is wrong.
That was a good impersonation of that developer.
That to me is just the example of, it's just so overblown. I mean, after the fact, you're having unnamed developers saying stuff like that. It's just almost to me an example of such forced news.
Mm-hmm.
I'm ashamed we're talking about it.
I'm ashamed we actually put it in the topic list as well. Let's just delete this entire podcast.
Pretend like you didn't hear any of this. Just erase your brain. Go to, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Ah, great reference.
So do you think the overreaction then is just because this is Apple?
I'm sure it's a little bit of everything. It's the perfect storm of Apple problem, versus people who love to just inflate things, and then people coming out and saying that I told them so, and people getting wrong directions. It's just all of those things combined, I think, probably.
Do you think it's going to affect the brand and sales?
Initially, probably, but I think long term, it's just another one of those things where they'll correct it and then it'll get better over time, and people will say, oh, you remember that fiasco of 2012? And they'll be like, yeah, but look at all the things they've done since then. So I don't think long term it's going to hurt anything.
I think it's going to take down the company.
Oh, do you?
20 years from now, we're going to be like, remember Mapplegate? That really rocked. What was that company called? I don't even remember because they haven't been around for so long. They thought they were so awesome because they had touch screens. Now we never touch anything.
We don't even touch each other.
I haven't seen another human being in 25 years.
It's sterile now. Everything is sterile.
Anyway, so basically, the wrap up on this story is it's not even a story, and it shouldn't be our superhuman review.
No, it shouldn't. As a matter of fact, once we post this, we're going to re-edit it and delete this section entirely.
Yeah.
So you should get it while it lasts.
Enjoy it while it's hot, people. It'll be gone soon. Yeah, how many humans do you give Mapplegate? Go ahead.
Well, if I were to rate the news stories in general, then the fact that they blew it out of proportion, I would say I'd give it a 1 human.
How many humans would you give the Apple Map app?
You know what? I'd give the Apple Map app probably 4 humans. And I think that it could improve. I'm not denying that fact. But it does exactly what I want it to do.
Yeah. I would say here's where I fall in my ratings. I've just figured out all the math. And I would give the Apple Map app 4 humans. I will give the Apple Mapplegate news stories 4 humans. Because you got to give them credit. They made a lot of news out of nothing. And I would give the name Mapplegate 4 humans because it's the ultimate gate.
It is. It's a great gate.
Well, anyway, that's about our show for this week.
Yeah, you can find links to most of the topics we discussed today on our blog, thinkmonsters.com/stomp, or on our Facebook page, facebook.com/thinkmonsters. You can also email us with any questions or topics you'd like us to discuss on the show at podcast@thinkmonsters.com.
We'll be back next week with more marketing chatter, even though we won't be talking about Apple. Catch you then, humans.
Speaking human.